Welcome to the Unfettered Wealth Podcast with Eric Tashlein from Connecticut Capital. In this podcast, we help business owners and successful professionals plan for better wealth outcomes. Join us for this journey where we explore ways to help you identify better wealth decisions to help you achieve an unfettered life. It's time to ask yourself, what do you want more of?
Hello and welcome to Unfettered Wealth with Eric Tashlein. Eric, how are you?
Doing great this morning, Eric. How are you?
I am looking forward to the weekend. It has been a long week, but incredibly productive. How's your week been?
Yeah, it's been fantastic. I mean, Connecticut's just had this great span of sunny days and warmish weather for this time of year. So I'm hoping it tracks right through to the holidays.
Eric, I've never been to Connecticut. I can just imagine that it's just getting more and more beautiful as this time of year comes along. So I'm a little jealous. I'll be honest. Yeah.
You know, Eric, at your advancing age, it's not a bad idea to come out here and see the leaves change before it's too late.
Before the fall and winter of my own life crippled me down. Yeah. Geez. Well, how encouraging can you possibly be this morning? Speaking of beautiful, you've got a guest on this morning. Brian Parke has joined you, and he is in the office. Brian, good morning.
Good morning, Eric. How are you?
I am old, apparently. According to Eric, I am on death's doorstep. We better get this podcast done quickly before I just nod off into the abyss. How about that?
Sounds great, except for your abyss.
Exactly. All right, Brian, I know that you've been working with Eric for quite a while. Eric, why'd you bring on the show?
Brian has been my business partner now for 3 or 4 years. We've worked together for over a decade. It's actually been a partnership that's worked really well. And believe me, over the years, I've had so much business experience where that has not been the case. So we really complement each other well. And for that reason, I wanted to bring Brian on to have the audience get to know him a little better. Brian, great to have you here. Wanted to ask you, why financial services?
Well, Eric, I consider myself very fortunate to have stumbled upon this profession. It was a series of things that led me here. It wasn't one thing in particular. It wasn't like I had an aha moment when I was looking to go to college. Actually, as a freshman in college, I was an advertising major. I don't know if you knew that. Originally, being a kid who grew up watching probably way too much TV, I was highly influenced by these ad campaigns that I still to this day can remember. And so my original thought for my career would be that I would be this creative mind behind, hopefully, an iconic ad campaign. So I entered as a freshman advertising major. I went to Quinnipiac University, and they were one of the few schools around that had specifically an advertising major. I think my first step towards financial services actually occurred prior to getting there when I received a note in the mail from a professor at Quinnipiac. His name is Christopher Ball. Still to this day, consider him one of the most influential people I met at Quinnipiac. There was a letter saying that I had scored well enough on my SATs that I was now qualified to be able to take an economics course, an honors economics course. And I didn't know the first thing about economics. I didn't really know what I was getting myself into. What I did know at that time was I wanted to push myself in college. So I opted in, and I was opened up to this whole new world that I didn't realize was there. I very quickly changed my major to economics. And I started my progression through various finance courses, which kept the snowball rolling down the hill. Fast forward to my junior year, it was a bit of a blessing and a curse. I had the whole world seemingly open to me. I didn't know which direction I wanted to head. I was interviewing for internships at insurance companies, investment banks, even a large conglomerate. And then, of course, I had that fateful phone call where you called me at 8 o'clock on a Friday morning.
I know that's an awful idea with a college student, right?
College junior, remind
thinking
you.
About Thursday nights.
I did not have Friday classes, but I picked up. It wasn't until I sat down with you that I was opened up to what it was to be a financial planner. I don't know how I did not know about financial planning or investment management before that time. I guess the commercials back in the 90s must not have been very good in the financial services. I'm not sure. I don't know how I was so oblivious to this industry because looking back, it's so obvious to me that I should have set out from the start to be an advisor. I've always had an interest in small business, teaching, which is so important to what we do. Being creative, as I mentioned before, learning, which is imperative. You have to continue learning to keep up with what's going on. And then lastly, I just love working with people. To be able to see that you've made a meaningful difference in someone's life is just very, very rewarding to myself. Being an advisor, especially in an independent office, is really all of those things and more.
Having worked with you on so many client situations, I love that teaching aspect, that quality that you have in you comes through, because there's times we take things for granted in terms of the topics or the types of investments that we're discussing. But oftentimes for these individuals, it's the first run through and they don't necessarily understand it. I think you do a great job of taking time to make sure they do before they'd ever consider investing. I agree with you. I think this profession for you is a natural one.
To add to that point, one of the things that you and I think, believe very strongly is that investors should not be investing in anything they don't understand. And so when we're talking to a client, I think it's almost more important that we're able to make sure they understand fully what it is that we're talking about, because otherwise a failure there for us to be able to communicate that and teach about it is almost like a lost opportunity in my books. I see that as a very important thing to our job.
I know that you have a broad range of capabilities in financial planning, but are there certain areas you think might be your specialty?
Being an advisor, more specifically a CFP, requires a strong understanding in estate planning, investments, taxes, and insurance, and really how all of those work together. To be fully understanding that is very important. And I think it's something that we can take for granted at times. So, once you've learned it, it's just seemingly common knowledge to us. But we worked very hard to get that knowledge. And so over the years, I've come to learn through conversations with other professionals, be it fellow advisors, CPAs, attorneys, accountants, or even sometimes, an investment company rep might make a comment or two. And just, I've come to realize that we really should be proud of our attention to detail when it comes to our planning solutions. And specifically, I'd say the tax element of that, because for a client base like ours, where really one of the largest risks to their wealth eroding is the taxes involved. I take a lot of pride in having that be one of our specialties, because way back when I first started with you, I was thinking about that. And basically, what do I need to really focus in on? Because that is such an important aspect of preserving wealth. How do we preserve wealth? And taxes was one of those things. When I was 25, I just moved to Milford, and I remember I did not have much furniture in my condo. It was basically me, a computer, and my couch. And I remember I was so interested in this question of how do we preserve wealth. I built an Excel spreadsheet for computing a tax return. I built a 1040 in Excel with all of these schedules and worksheets that were applicable. I realized that's exceptionally nerdy, but I didn't have much to do. So it was something I did in my extra time.
I think people should judge their advisors by the ability to actually create that in Excel versus their golf handicap prize. So I give you credit for that.
I won't take too much credit for it. The IRS, if anyone is looking to be as nerdy as I was, the IRS does have instructions on their website as to what information goes where and how the calculations are made. So in doing that exercise, I was able to just vastly improve my understanding of how various elements of financial activities in the given year will impact the way that your tax bill comes out at the end of the year. Sometimes you may not realize that, Apple just may have hit an all-time high. You're looking to sell it. But if you do that, you might actually be paying a whole lot more in taxes unless you had some other way of mitigating that.
When we're looking at a client's tax return, and again, we don't do tax preparation, but we need to be aware about taxes, certainly. We've picked up a lot of clients over the years that really weren't aware of the 1099s they're receiving, especially folks that have had mutual funds, or if there's significant trading that's occurring not in a tax sensitive way. And as you said earlier, it makes a huge impact on the bottom line in terms of growing wealth.
To be clear, I am not a CPA or an accountant, and I don't pretend to know more about taxes and those professionals. In fact, you and I strongly encourage that when we do have a tax related or potentially tax driven piece of advice is that we bring in those professionals. In some cases, we're bringing in an estate planning attorney to make sure that, everyone is in agreement from all angles of looking at this problem, that we've all come to the same conclusion that this is in fact the best way to go forward. So we definitely try to involve other people in our decisions and get buy-in from all parties. And that type of synergy, I think, leads to the best outcomes for clients.
I think our best meetings with clients, especially when they have major decisions, whether it's retirement or selling their business, is getting us all at a table, CPA, attorney, advisors, and clients, and just having that conversation, bringing all that expertise in, absolutely builds better outcomes. So I totally agree with you.
Outside of taxes, I think we also do a great job of doing all the little things well. If you look at any successful sports team out there, there's a few that are dynasties. You look at the Yankees, for an example, or even just the Red Sox, to give the other side of the coin. Any team that has long-term success and continued success, they do the little things right. And those little things add up to big outcomes. So there's a saying that I heard once, that a little mistake with a little amount of money is a little amount of money, but a little mistake with a big amount of money can be a lot of money that you lose. And so I think it's so important to pay attention to those little details. And sometimes, especially with the way that investments work and compounding, it's something that maybe it is something you're not doing that could potentially be changing the way you retire. And so one example I'll give, oftentimes we'll find that, maybe a 40-year-old or, mid-40s couple is so busy with living their lives, running around, carting kids to school and sports, and they started a 401k 20 years ago and really have not paid attention to it since. And so you might have one spouse who is far and away exceeding their company's match, and might have one spouse who isn't meeting their match, without even changing the amount of money that the couple is saving each month or each week. If you just split that up a little bit differently, you would actually maximize the amount of money that's going towards their retirement by getting a full match on both sides. I don't want to paint other advisors with a singular brush here, but I think it is a very easy thing to do, where because you're not managing that 401k, or because it's not something that you're looking at every day, that it just goes overlooked. And so I think for us, we pay special attention to those little details, because I can't imagine not having a 50% or 100% return on my contributions that was just missed.
The great thing about our office is one of our goals and values is not to take on so many clients that we can't spend a significant amount of time with our existing client base, right? And I think that's one of the reasons we can look at some of those areas that maybe we're not managing or involved with, but just being able to be consultative in those areas that we're not getting paid on, I think is a huge value to the client.
Absolutely.
Brian, so if you could share a favorite client transformation for us.
I will do my best to not be too specific here, because I want to be respectful of individuals. There's a few situations that I feel as though are most rewarding for us as advisors when we're able to actually make an impact in someone's life. And that's, first and foremost, anytime that someone is in a time of crisis, typically that's that they lost a loved one, be it a parent or a spouse, or in some cases that's a child, unfortunately. And they're going through such a moment of just pain that worrying about finances is the last thing that they should be doing, but sometimes it's something that they feel they need to be doing. And so to be there, to be able to walk them through how they're going to be okay, and to refocus them on the things that are important for their healing, is something that I find very, very powerful and rewarding for myself. And I can't say that I enjoy it, because of course in the moment it's miserable. You're suffering right there with them. I do think that to be able to see people come out onto the other side of that, for them to be able to put one foot in front of the other and just take those little steps that then lead them to a place of being able to handle that loss and cope with that loss, I think is a very important thing. The other situation that I find very rewarding from an advisor standpoint is when you have a client that is maybe has done a tremendous job of putting together a nest egg and retirement savings, but might be having some cash flow issues. And a classic example of that would be if someone who's invested in real estate all their lives or has put almost all of their savings into an IRA. And typically in those situations, depending on the amount of cash flows needed in various years, you can find that it would be very punitive to either draw from the IRA or in some cases, investment real estate is not necessarily liquid, although with all the New Yorkers currently fleeing from New York, Connecticut real estate seems to be turning around quite quickly these days. But that's not normally the case for residents who've been here 20 plus years. I think you can agree with me on that. One particular case, I remember there was a situation where a client had set out to, upon retirement, want to pay down 3 different mortgages. He had bought 3 different homes. And I think like all retirees, the idea of being debt-free day one of retirement is just very settling. You're no longer receiving a paycheck, but you no longer have money going out on a monthly basis. Prior to meeting with us, his plan had been to just cut the check from his IRA. Now, 3 mortgages, more than likely, you're talking hundreds of thousands of dollars at this point. And had he done that, the tax bill could have very easily been somewhere in the range between $50,000 and $100,000, depending on how he did it. I remember we worked through it and we worked through various solutions to, basically mitigate taxes. That was our first and foremost, while still paying down the debt. And in doing so, we didn't have him pay any taxes that he otherwise would not have been paying. It was very incredible for the client to sit there as we're telling him the news of if you do X, Y, and Z, you won't owe this $50,000 tax bill that had previously been staring you in the face.
And I remember that meeting, and I think that's the beauty of what we do, right? It's just people are great at what they've done maybe throughout their careers, but they usually only retire one time. And so for us to come up with some solutions that would ultimately lead to better outcomes later, like we always mention, that's our goal here. So I remember that, and I think for us, it's always we feel great about what we do.
Absolutely.
Beyond business, I know I've known your family. I've seen the kids grow up. If you can tell our listeners a little bit about them, I'd appreciate it.
Sure. Well, I've been spending lots of time with my family lately, so I'm happy to tell you about them. My wife, Allison, and I have 2 kids. My oldest, Julianne, is going to be turning 5 in December, and Owen just turned 2 in August. It's interesting sharing the home with a workspace. I have to say that they do a tremendous job most of the time, though World War III has broken out maybe a couple times or 2. Allie and I have been married for a little over 6 years now, but it's funny, I actually met her when I was in 8th grade. We knew of each other since, going back now 20 years plus, but only really got to know her about 8 or 9 years after we graduated high school. So it's funny how the world works. It's very interesting, Eric, I've shared this with you, but it's very interesting to be on a date with somebody and you're so used to talking to someone as though they don't know maybe the same people or anything like that. And you go to tell a story and you realize, yes, this person knows all of those people and probably has heard this story from various angles because she knows all the people in it. So it's a very, very interesting thing to have known her, but didn't really know her until much later in our lives. So with the kids, it's wonderful to see them kind of growing closer together these days. Of course, COVID has changed our way of life for everybody, and it's tragic in most cases. I think right now the silver lining for me is just seeing the bond that my children are forming. I remember, so Owen would have been 18 months-ish when things started first getting very serious. And he would walk into the room with Julianne and just babble some made-up words. And because they had spent so much time together, she knew exactly what he wanted to do. And they would build like a block tower and knock it over. And they were just having a great time. So I think that, our life previous to this was such that they only spent a couple hours a day together or sleeping. So it's nice to be able to see them grow this bond that I think they're going to both treasure for the rest of their lives. So that's, for me, it's nice to see that. It's a bright spot in the day.
So it's funny with me, my girls are as close as they possibly can be at this point with a senior in high school and a preteen. They're on different wavelengths oftentimes, but it is good. We've had some intermingling that wouldn't have occurred as well. Yeah, I think the relationship's all the better for it too.
Oh, it's good to hear.
So I know you have a lot of hobbies and pursuits outside of work, and if you want to share some of those with us too, I'd appreciate it.
I'd say the leading hobby of mine or interest has always been sports. I've been interested in sports since the time that I was probably 4 years old. I remember I started playing hockey back then. Pretty soon after, I was playing baseball. In fact, actually, my father has video of me playing in the backyard with him when I was 2.5. Actually, I was able to hit an underhand pitched wiffle ball. And so sports have always been really, really a huge part of my life. Now, a couple injuries later, I have not been active in my sports, but I still follow. I really enjoy college hockey. I really enjoy watching playoff baseball, which we're getting into pretty soon here. So those things are fun. And then, of course, I'm an avid football fan just because I've come to love the sport. Having known a few people, friends of friends actually are in the sport professionally. And so with that, I kind of got looped into watching those games. And actually, a little bit of an embarrassing admission, but I'll state it anyway. Probably about a year and a half ago, got a habit of watching YouTube videos on my phone as I'm doing the dishes. I'll prop it up on the window, and I'm not bothering anybody. I'll just learn about maybe how to fix a carburetor or something like that. Another interest of mine is just learning things. For whatever reason, the YouTube algorithm decided that they needed to show me a chess video.
There you go. And you know why, Brian? It's because they know that you use Excel actively.
They know me better. Well, I am subscribed to Learning Excel is Fun or something like that. I don't remember exactly what it's called. But anyway, this chess video popped up and my hands were all sudsy, so I didn't bother trying to change it. And lo and behold, it was this chess. I didn't even know this existed. It was what they call bullet chess. Okay, so two people playing each other and they each have a minute to finish the game. And if you run out of time, you lose. And it's wild to watch two people try and play a game of chess in 60 seconds. And so I ended up watching the entire thing. And it had commentary, and the commentator was losing his mind over certain moves that I didn't understand. And it was very interesting. And so I found myself after the fact saying, well, let me go check this out. I didn't realize that chess could be played in shorter time intervals. I always pictured it as this really long, drawn out, boring game that no one has time for. I certainly didn't with young kids. I'm looking for something that I can do where I'm not going to all of a sudden be, middle of watching a football game and I've got to go change a diaper and that's the end of it. So with that, I started playing chess online, and I have to say, Eric, I've absolutely fallen in love with it. It is such an incredibly challenging and rewarding game, and it keeps you engaged. It keeps your mind going. I will have a little bit of a brag. So probably 8 months into starting to play, I joined this tournament. Thousands of people, and it's the online chess community has only grown through the pandemic, and so there's hundreds of thousands of people playing online all over the world. So it's easy to get a game. I'm playing this chess tournament, and I get matched up against a gentleman from Moscow who has a international designation for his chess ability. I mean, it's called a FIDE rating for anyone who's familiar with it, but his FIDE rating was 2150, which is just below where you start getting titles for your chess accomplishments. And I remember I was playing him in a 3-minute game and I won with a checkmate, which is not what I was expecting out of that game. And he promptly quit the tournament. And I think that I also quit. I said, I'm walking out on top. So that was my crowning achievement in playing online chess.
That's funny. That's just another reason. We don't want the Russians any angrier at us at this point.
Hey, listen, I don't wish to create too many enemies.
Well, that's great, Brian. So is there anything else that you'd like to share with us as we come to a close here?
Well, I just want to take a moment and say thank you for inviting me to do this. It's nothing I've ever really done before, so I really enjoyed it, and thank you.
This was great, and this is a long time coming. We'll definitely have you on again in future episodes. Eric, thank you as well for introducing us, and hope you have a great weekend.
Oh yeah, no, this is fantastic. Brian, it was such a pleasure to meet you. I know that Eric mentioned he'd like to have you back on. I would love to get both of you in studio when that's possible again to talk about some of the things that you guys are accomplishing. And so I'd love to hear more stories of victories from your clients for sure. But even more than that, there's another podcast I would love to do. And I think it should be Julianne and Sophia taking over the mics and just talking about what they do best and maybe, talking about what they think their dads actually do at work. I think
that would be very entertaining.
It would be very entertaining.
At one point, my daughter had told me that she wanted to be an astronaut and a financial planner, and it was going to be a weekend gig as the financial planner.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, weekends on the moon,
Yeah,
well, there's some of those out there.
It's a niche market.
It is, but doggone it, she would just absolutely slay it, wouldn't she?
I think she would.
And I love the fact that you both spoke about the positives during the pandemic, right? I mean, the kids are getting closer together, the family's getting closer together, even though World War III is present here and there. It sounds like there's been some benefits to a pretty stormy day. I guess the silver lining, you've both found it. That's what I like about talking to Eric all the time, Brian, is that he will find the silver lining in just about anything. So that's just fun to spend time with him on this podcast. Guys, again, thank you so much for your time today.
Well, thank you.
Thanks, Eric.
And the last thank you, of course, goes to you, the listening audience. Thank you for tuning in and listening to the Unfettered Wealth Podcast with Eric Tashlein. If you have not subscribed to the podcast yet, please click the subscribe now button below. This way, when Eric comes out with a new podcast, it'll show up directly on your listening device. This makes it much easier to share these podcasts with your friends and family. Again, thank you so much for listening today. For everyone at Connecticut Capital Management Group, this is Eric Johnson reminding you to live your best day every day. And we'll see you next time.
Thank you for listening to the Unfettered Wealth Podcast. Click the subscribe button below to be notified when new episodes become available. The information covered and posted represents the views and opinions of the guest and does not necessarily represent the views or opinions of Connecticut Capital. The content has been made available for informational and educational purposes only. Content should not be construed as personalized investment, legal, or tax advice. Please consult your advisor, attorney, or tax advisor in regards to your individual situation. Eric Tashlein is an investment advisory representative of Connecticut Capital Management Group, LLC, a registered investment advisor. Connecticut Capital Management Group, LLC, and Connecticut Benefits Group, LLC are not affiliated.